Michael D. Shaw is my guest. Mike, how are you?
Hey, just great, just great. And what about you? How's everything in Ground Zero?
It's cooking
Political
along.
settle?
I'm learning how to deal with a couple of health issues, but it's when you get to be my age, you have to sort of strategize a little bit.
Well, when I get to that point, I'll have to deal with it, I guess.
Exactly, and I could do another show advising people on my suggestions for preserving health as you get older. But in the meantime, I shall forge forward.
All
In
right.
my class, one of the assignments was to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, which
All
I had
right.
not otherwise done. And it goes to show that college education can have some value, only in that it did get me to read something that I probably not would have read otherwise, unless it was assigned to me to read. And I read it, and I've already only read 3 chapters of it, but
Yeah.
I'm extremely impressed with him. And he was almost like a Trump-like figure in his day, and he was demonized by the same people that demonized Trump. He spoke basic truths. He didn't care what people thought about it. He laid it out in terms of how Black people were treated in this country in his own lifetime and previous. And he called for nationalism. He called for unity. He called to stand up to this corrupted establishment that was trying to keep them divided and keep people off center. And then, he's like, he just really like cranked it up. And plus, he embraced a kind of a quirky form of Islam, the Nation of Islam. But
Well, they're the ones that killed him anyway, right?
yeah, eventually. But the point is that what people miss is the fact that he was very vigorously socially conservative, monogamous, straight marriage, no alcohol, no drugs, self-sufficiency, employment, building your own life, not depending on anyone else, not getting distracted by these. He particularly hates the liberal establishment and how they're using all these kind of like really scathing stuff about them, the same stuff that Trump would say, that I would say, and you would say.
Well,
And
this is why, to interrupt for one second, this is why he's not really spoken of very much these days.
Yes, I think it's true. Or they just, it's kind of like, I talked earlier about Barbara Jordan. They
Yeah.
focus on only the one thing about her that fits their narrative, which is that, I'm sorry to bring it up because of her memory, but she happened to be gay. But that wasn't something she ever talked about publicly. It was nobody's business. But that's the thing. Oh, look, what they don't talk about is that she was very patriotic. She was generally conservative. And her biggest contribution in Congress was to close the border and deport illegal aliens. People don't realize that. And also to improve the election system. The very same issues that President Trump is doing. But in his case, he ends up having a falling out with the Nation of Islam. I haven't gotten into that part of the book yet, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he rejected some of the weird, interpretations on things. And he also, the fact that the leader, Muhammad, was, a little bit, quick with women and, all this stuff going on. He just didn't
Well,
like.
I think you're being very kind. He was he liked young girls.
Yeah.
And they didn't try to hide it very much. That was the other thing, and it didn't exactly take 60 years to come out like it did with Cesar Chavez.
Right.
So,
no, he brought it out right away.
Yeah.
And then he ends up going to Mecca, and they say, well, he became like an internationalist as opposed to as a nationalist.
Yeah.
And I think there's some truth to that. And his internationalism was, if he had lived, it may have led him in the direction of radical Islam. I don't know, because he did say that he felt that if America had become Islamic, that would be a solution to racism, which is not true. And I think, but the thing that I find interesting about him is that he was someone who was open to thinking and change and ideas, and he wasn't like locked in like so many people I know who receive a script at birth practically, and they just step through the rest of their life never really thinking for themselves, and they hold that as a virtue. I mean, he did change with new information and think about things differently. And I find him to be genuinely a patriotic American and, loyal to the interests of Black people who were oppressed, of course. And, but, his answer was entrepreneurialism, self-sufficiency, picking oneself up in terms of personal beliefs in their own worth. And, it's something that I'm now looking into further. I mean, it's a very interesting piece of history. What say you?
Well, yeah. I mean, the trouble is that he didn't fit the mold. There's some thought, and I guess you'll get this from the autobiography, that, or maybe other writers about him, that maybe he was losing faith, if not in Islam, at least in the way it was represented by Elijah Muhammad. He's a fairly cool character. And it just is a little too messy, because the way they like teaching history almost universally is that it's sort of the Howard Zinn thing. Everything on the patriotic side is bad,
right,
and everybody else is monolithically a hero. That's why, you and I are going to have to be 100 years older before they start telling the truth about Martin Luther King, for example. I think it's a very messy part of Black history that they don't really want to deal with. The idea that the Democrats were Jim Crow, Ku Klux Klan, suddenly they get all the Blacks to become Democrat, largely because of handouts and welfare. And it's just a bad history that no one likes dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, and also the Democrats and the liberal establishment, they wanted to keep Black people on the reservation. They didn't want them to be too uppity.
Oh, for sure.
Clarence Thomas famously said during his confirmation hearing, they don't want high-tech lynching of an uppity Black, and they kind of, this is why, in a sense, when Malcolm X was a young man, his parents admired Marcus Garvey, who was another Black leader who was done in by the establishment. And the establishment was set up mainly by the NAACP and these groups who sort of were like, get along and, sort of not really advocating for entering into self-sufficiency and, entrepreneurialism, and really like taking the thing directly and going into, not asking to participate in American life, but grabbing it and doing it. And I think there's also the difference between W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a socialist, who ended up being a communist, and who was very much promoted by the NAACP and this establishment view, and Booker T. Washington, who was the president of Tuskegee University, and who was saying, "Look, the liberals may give us a few tokens. They'll bring some people up, and both Malcolm X said this also, and he compared it to the House N-word. They give you a few pieces of gold, and you do what they say, as opposed to actually teaching Black people how to get out of poverty by learning skills, by learning trades, by learning how to be carpenters, by learning how to do things, and then gradually working one's way by earning it into education and into overcoming what was a very terrible history. Not just sort of these being used as sort of a tool for this liberal establishment. And I think that's a thread that's run through that history. And
I mean, the most recent example probably is when Biden was running in 2020, and he wasn't doing very well in the primaries, and he got Clyburn to rally the troops in
right.
South Carolina, and which just proves what you're saying, that whole aspect is, well, we're going to kiss the butt of massa to see what kind of scraps we can get, which is alive and well today in terms of guys like Clyburn. That, I mean, if he had any self-respect at all, he'd have to hate someone like Joe Biden, who was aligned with segregationists until fairly recent in his career. But yet, it was more important to be part of the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, and Biden saying, if you don't support me, you're not really black.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's a suppression of this sort of more, assertive black identity, which I identify with in many ways, and which is one that recognizes the corruption of the left introducing moral ambiguity into the community in the form of drugs. This idea that we should condemn the last line of defense from criminal gangs like the police, opening the borders, which is going to rip off black labor, this kind of anti-business, anti-religion, anti-education by taking phonics out of the schools, all of it.
Well, it's a co-opting of the so-called black church.
Yes.
Which ends up being just a unit of the Democratic establishment. I would argue have very little to do with Christian principles and more to do with organizing the troops. Right?
Well, the black church, I mean, originally, certainly going back to slave times and right up to probably the 1930s and 40s, was a powerful moral force in this country. I think it brought all of Christianity in line by its example. It was unabashedly based on faith and strength. And I think what happened, it was corrupted by people like, Margaret Sanger, funded by the Rockefellers, who introduced the Negro Project into Harlem, right? Abortion, birth control, and she, her agenda was.
Okay, but Chuck, let's not minimize that was just lapped up by the black preachers.
Well, that's my point. They basically got money. They went in and they realized that they can't have Margaret Sanger, this with her white face, go in and tell black people to get abortions because it just wouldn't work. Plus, she was racist. She wanted to eliminate the black race, which she viewed as dysgenic, and she was friendly with Nazi socialists like Ernst Rudin. Instead, they basically, greased a few palms. Let's put it that way. They went out to the black church and ministers suddenly were getting big fat contributions and they became corrupted. And they introduced the Negro Project. And that's how they did it. And that's how they've done it ever since. You have these corrupt, rotten political machines in the big cities run by black mayors who are on the take and corrupt black politicians who work hand in glove with these left-wing internationalist, illuminated establishment figures who want to not only keep black people down, but who want to own the cities by owning the voting machines. And basically what you have since the 60s is stagnant, rotten, poor, corrupt, violent cities. They're not doing anything for black people. Trump is doing things for black people. I mean, they're basically, they pulled out the moral rug from under them with the corrupted ministers. They pulled out the education rung with these huge schools that stripped away things like phonics and other things that help people read on their own and think on their own, not to mention trade. They pulled out entrepreneurialism with their anti-business attitudes. And the result is and they've destroyed the family. I mean, D.P. Moynihan talked about this in his report. He was Assistant Secretary of Labor at the time, happens to be a sociologist. He wrote a report in 1965 saying that the black family is actually quite intact. Black marriage is intact. It was a value that was seen as triumphant coming out of slave times. Black people were armed. The NRA, let's not forget, was started to help arm black people who were being attacked in the South by the Ku Klux Klan, and that they were controlling their own destiny, and that this idea of putting them all on a national welfare would destroy and disintegrate the black family. And he was absolutely right. And it, suddenly women got more money if they got rid of their man, and then they got even more money if they had another child. I'm not blaming them. I'm blaming the system that did this.
All right, but I mean, let's be critical here. At what point do you start blaming them? To look in the mirror, and say, well, wait a minute, how do we let this happen to ourselves? And I'm not singling out black people, because if you look at New York City, I'd like to know how many Jews didn't vote for Mamdani.
Another story.
Serious.
I know. Well, those are very deluded people. I mean, really, in a way, it reminds me of what Malcolm X was saying to his own black community. He goes, "You have to wake up to your own interest here. You have to wake up to your own agency. You have to wake up to and stop cowering to the white massa," as he put it.
Yeah.
And that these Jews who vote for Mamdani and they're anti-Israel, it's a ghetto mentality. They don't, they're so obsequious to being accepted by this unseen establishment. First of all, they've forgotten about what it is to be a Jew. They have no idea about God. They have no idea about the Torah handed by God at Sinai as a gift to the world, and that they're supposed to try to live by that and exemplify its values so that other people would do the same, and we would have a more spiritual world. They don't understand that. What they understand is that they just want to be liked. They want to get along. They have to be in this new world where everybody, everybody has, and their entire value is not Judaism. It's all about whether or not they, as Jews, accept someone else, including people they may not like. Look, that might have some value, but it doesn't say anything about who you are. Like the black, like Malcolm X describes black people as accommodating to white interests that are not in the best interest of them. And quite rightfully, I mean, he does it with no uncertain terms.
Well, I keep jumping over to the Jewish thing because a lot of what Malcolm X is saying can be applied there too.
Of course.
And in
its own variation, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, the whole problem with religion in an atheist society that we have now is that obviously for the individual practitioner it means a hell of a lot, but writ large, it really doesn't. I mean, you could endlessly read and see in the media almost every day that Joe Biden is a, quote, devout Catholic. Well, pro-abortion, pro-homosexual. I mean, well, how exactly is he devout Catholic? And I would have fun challenging people on that. Asking that very question. Well, how is Biden a devout Catholic? Well, he says he is. Oh.
He does the performative things. He'll show up at church. He'll put on a suit and he'll have there and sit for a sermon and put money in the pew. And you know what I mean? It's very performative. Same thing with the Cuomos, right? I mean, it's and Pelosi for that matter.
Well, it is performative because before he was elected, this goes back to maybe, I'm guessing, something like 2014, 2015, when I was back in Virginia. I was a member of a fairly conservative parish, and Biden steps in. And that's the last place we'll be kind and say a liberal Catholic, which I don't even think he's Catholic at all, but that would be the absolute last place you'd find a guy. But yet he knew that was a fairly connected parish in Great Falls, which is a fairly well-to-do suburb, and so on and so forth, which, by the way, was also the church of your good friend, who I think died, Bob Hansen, the FBI agent who was a spy
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
was,
Right, right. Uh-huh.
was a member of that parish. So
Well, I mean, in a sense, I suppose you could say that there's a similar phenomenon with American Catholics, in that the establishment is really not in sync with Catholic beliefs or values,
yeah, yeah,
and
it's really sad.
and unfortunately, that includes some of the bishops, as we know. Um,
Well, I would say most of the bishops, but we
and
don't. Yeah.
and not to get into it, but I wonder about this present Pope, frankly. I don't know if you saw this story, but when the white smoke came out of the chimney in the Vatican, they assumed that his social media had disappeared, but it didn't. And I think Trump has it, and it's out there, and it's really, I mean, what's known about it is that he was anti-Trump, taking shots at Trump, and some of the usual kind of undigested cliches that you might even hear from the No Kings type of anti-Trump.
Yeah, yeah.
And that he really didn't like J.D. Vance. And that there were rumors that there's more there too. Like he's not particularly anti-abortion, and he's not against gay marriage, and he's not against a lot of the
Well,
left.
right. I mean, but
No, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying those are rumors.
No, but it's not uniquely him. All right. What you'll see with a large number of the bishops is that this liberal rot came into the church, saying that there's a number of conservative cardinals like Robert Sarah that would have made a better pope.
Right.
But I don't know when you could argue about when this liberal pope thing started, but certainly, as I wrote in a comment on one of my columns, at least Leo is following in the footsteps of Francis, except he's at least not quite as corrupt.
In a way, he's more dangerous because he's more intelligent, he's more articulate.
But he comes out of that liberal tradition, and it really has no place in the church. I mean, that's the whole problem with it. But it all started with Vatican II, and the idea of this constant reform. It just, I mean, I don't want to go into a whole historical.
No, I understand. I mean, I've seen some things about that where Vatican II resulted in really throwing out a large part of what the core of Catholic values and beliefs. I saw a video where these nuns were told, "Hey, you're done. No more of the habits, no more of this, no more of that. You can't go here, you can't go there," and they were literally crying. They were like, "This is, it's over." I don't know if that's true. I mean, some of this stuff, when you see it online.
Well, I mean, Francis was working very diligently to try to eliminate the Latin Mass.
Why? I mean, it's a tradition that should be available to people who want it, at least. I mean, this would be like
there were dioceses that fought that, and I don't think Leo's going in that direction, but it's too bad. But as my old friend, the late Vin Lewis, Catholic apologist, would say, "Look, Mike, how often do you interact directly with the Pope? I mean, It's too bad that the guy's liberal, but it doesn't really affect much of what I do."
No, but he has influence, and I'm hoping that a couple of things. First of all, I hope that the fact that these emails and these tweets and all of his social media was not deleted might have a little bit of a kind of a moderating effect on him, because the truth is out there and it could go out there more. And he obviously doesn't want that, or else they wouldn't have tried to delete it all. Maybe it's
the other problem you get into is this starstruck thing that people, I think, really want to believe that we have to follow this guy, the spiritual leader, blah, blah, blah. And ideally, that would be the case.
Right.
But it is well-known Catholic tradition that the model of the church is the Virgin Mary. not any fallible individual.
Right.
And, there have been plenty of bad popes. There's been a lot of good ones.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And
but it transcends them because there's certain
yeah.
institutional structures that just, I mean, that's true also of Judaism. I mean, you can have some really rotten people, but there is a basic infrastructure that's not breached. And it's because it comes from a higher authority. I mean, let's just put it that way. Hebrew national, exactly. I love that slogan.
We answer to a higher authority.
We answer to a higher authority. Jesus said it himself when he stood before Pilate. And Pilate said, "Who are you? Are you king of the Jews?" He says, "I answer to a higher authority."
Yeah, my kingdom is not of this world.
That's right. I answer to the king of the universe, in which case he was then immediately executed. Just like Malcolm X, right? I mean, people we know, Charlie Kirk. You speak up too quickly, you're too blunt. Look they've already tried to take out Trump. It's just, if you become too red-pilled, you're an inconvenience.
Yeah, well, these are interesting defining moments because now Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying that the Trump assassinations were fake.
What to do? What's the hell? That I don't know what to believe about her, but there is information out there. Who knows? Again, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. She's like in bed with what's his face, Soros' son.
Yeah.
And she's basically cashed out. She's gotten some nice financial benefits as part of this whole deal. I don't know if that's true. Again, I'm just going with no more information than any of us have. I'm not.
Well, as Candace Bergen said, after making the movie The Adventurers, she said she didn't realize how easy it would be to sell out. She was honest about it.
Yeah.
So
I don't know what the deal is with that, but it's very strange. I don't think she's being invited on conservative media anymore.
Yeah.
But
no, it's very similar to a wonderful figure in American history, Benedict Arnold. Ended up being hated by both sides.
Yeah, exactly. And he had
how are you going to trust the guy? The British never trusted him.
Well, I mean, when nobody likes a turncoat, even if they're turning to the right side, it puts a blemish. I mean, Whittaker Chambers talked about that he would be marked for the rest of his life, even though he turned to the right side.
Yeah.
It's just, it shows a basic character flaw that somebody could be so wrong about something but of course we hope that happens.
Well, we would call it more the prodigal son. That Whittaker Chambers came back, but when they turn the other way, we call them traitors. But then, of course, it depends who's naming them, right?
Right. That's true. But I don't know. Reading about Malcolm X makes me really see that some things don't change, and it's just the nature of being a strong individual who stands with principles and hopes that there's enough of us that we can continue to move the country in the right direction. That's simple.
There have been too many examples, though, not just in American history, but that's what I'm more familiar with, of these stand-up guys that, get assassinated.
Yeah. I mean, that's world history in a way. And, it's amazing I did a book on this, Assassination in America, where I show those connections between people who were assassinated and what they did to get that far and who was involved in who they were inconveniencing. It was usually the same cast of characters. And, people there were attempted assassinations. There's some interesting things I discovered. And one of the things that when Lincoln became president, there was this doctor that wanted to be the presidential doctor. He presided over the deaths of William Henry Harrison and Zachary Taylor. And Lincoln is like, are you freaking kidding me? He's not going anywhere near the White House. That man is like, I don't know who he is. But I mean, it's an interesting person to look into.
Well, there's an odd connection with that. As you know, Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, was obviously at the bedside of his own father when he was assassinated,
Yeah.
was present in the assassination of Garfield
Right.
and McKinley.
Yeah. After that, he was, I think he was invited to, with
Yeah.
Teddy. Said, you don't want me to come over. No, I'm like a bad,
I'm bad luck.
yeah, I'm a bad penny. I just, don't be in my presence. But anyway, the thing is that when you speak out too loudly, you're an inconvenience to the establishment. Kennedy is an incredible example of that. Um, the long list of the Clinton kill list is an interesting example. I get into that in my book.
Well, in the case of Kennedy,
yeah,
he pissed off a lot of people, but who do you think it really was?
I think it was a combination of people. Some of the anti-Israel people are saying that it was Israel because Kennedy was opposed to Israel's development of a nuclear bomb at Dimona, which, by the way, is true. Israel did not like Ben-Gurion really got it in his mind that Israel had to get a nuclear bomb in order to survive. And that was controversial in Israel. There was a lot of tussle over that amongst the establishment, but he kind of won the argument. He was the first prime minister. Kennedy was not happy about it. He sent inspectors over. The Israelis gave them the runaround. They were faking stuff, and they were trying to make it look like something else. It's not true that Johnson afterwards gave a green light to it. It really wasn't. It wasn't given a green light until Nixon, when Nixon said, "We know about it. We're going to turn a blind eye."
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that Israel sent an assassin. It's like that's, maybe there might have been some people involved. I don't know. I wouldn't totally dismiss that. I mean, Israel does what Israel does to preserve its own interest, and they make no apologies for it.
Remember also that the early 60s was a very propitious time. And it was, if you're going to do anything, it was fairly easy to make a lot of enemies because there was a lot going on. Okay. So
I think it had more to do with the fact that there's so many factors. The late Jim Marrs, did you know who he is? He wrote several excellent books. He's conspiracy-oriented books. One of them was The Fourth Reich. Really good research.
I remember. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he's not even a particularly conservative guy. He actually was published by Simon & Schuster. It wasn't like he was writing some weird right-wing books. And I think he died of natural causes. I mean, he was an older man. I interviewed him a few times. He claimed that Kennedy was assassinated because he was issuing silver certificates and doing an end run around the Federal Reserve. I actually think that theory has a lot of weight. Now, it's not the only thing, but Kennedy discovered that there was silver coin at Fort Knox that had been there since who knows when. And rather than go to the Federal Reserve and stop monetizing debt and giving them interest and doing the rotten way we do things in this country in terms of issuing currency, he issued silver certificates backed by those silver coins at no interest, directly owned by. They were not Federal Reserve notes; they were Treasury notes. There's a big difference. Right. They were legitimate money that you could basically go to a treasurer and turn that dollar in and get the equivalent in silver. And that was not something that the Federal Reserve and the banking establishment was happy about. And when it was underway at the time he was assassinated, and one of the first things Johnson did when becoming president was rescind that and go back to the Federal Reserve System.
Right.
Now, I did a book on this topic too about the history of monetary issuance in this country, and there were a lot of issues around assassination on that issue and the attempt by the international banking establishment to get a foothold on America's currency, which is, by the way, unconstitutional. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, says that Congress shall mint coin and determine the value thereof. And when they say coin, they don't literally mean necessarily a coin. They mean currency.
Right.
That Congress directly issues the currency. You don't need a Federal Reserve. I don't know if we get into the subject, but it's an interesting one. And there have been things going on behind the scenes in every administration, right from Washington till today, on this subject. Trump is taking on the Fed. It's very dangerous. But he's saying, who do these people think they are that they get to determine the value of our dollar by fixing interest rates? Where does it say that they get to do that? That's the government, the Treasury, and the Congress is supposed to do that. They can have a Federal Reserve do some, things as agents. I mean, under them, but not have that kind of power. I mean, they're connected to central banks around the world. They're a huge edifice. I mean, even it's a small example, but Powell, who I think is a very corrupt figure, he authorized a revamp of the Federal Reserve building in Washington, which is something like, I don't know, like billions of, like huge amounts of money, like $100 billion. It's really rotten. It's very corrupt. And where do they get that money? They print it, is where they get it. They have a printing press and they just, and every time they print a dollar that isn't productive and that goes beyond the gross domestic product, that weakens the value of the American working man's dollar. And that is something that goes to questions of sovereignty. We have a right to control the value of our currency. It goes to morality, because people who are doing this have an unfair advantage over us and can manipulate currencies in a way that makes them rich and that consolidates their economic engine. Big subject, maybe too big to get into now. I need to review my own book and remind, it's like, it's so
but you make the point that this has always been an issue.
Yes.
And it has provoked maybe a few assassinations.
Indeed, including possibly the Kennedy. But there are a lot of people that had it out for Kennedy. It's not just one group. The mafia didn't like him. I think RFK was going after them, even though he said he wouldn't, and even though they probably helped him get into the White House. The CIA was not too happy. He wanted to smash them into 1,000 pieces, just like Trump wants to do. The whole deep state, I think he was going to pull out of Vietnam. He said that to Walter Cronkite. They were sitting on the lawn of the house in Hyannis. He gave one final interview. He said, after election, I'm going to pull out of Vietnam. That was something the establishment wanted, that war. I mean, it's a lot of things. Another good author on the subject is Dr. Jerome Corsi, who wrote a pretty good book on the assassination.
Didn't you interview him a couple of times?
Many times. Yeah. He's kind of dropped out of interviews. He's retired. He said, I promised my wife when I reached a certain age, I'd no longer do interviews. So good man, really good books. He, he's the one that blew the whistle on John Kerry with the Swift boat veterans. And then he went on to do a really good book on whether or not Hitler had escaped Nazi Germany, which he made a pretty good case that he had. And his stuff is excellently researched. He's a Harvard PhD. He's got, political science. He's kind of he's another example of somebody who was vilified during the Mueller gang and their brown shirts. They were pressuring people to try to spill the beans on Trump. And if they didn't, they would be put in prison, like Paul Manafort, who I interviewed, a completely innocent man, right? Just got into some technicality and they squeezed him and said, you have to tell us about Trump. And we're trying to get Trump. This is Mueller, who was a monster, by the way. And Manafort said, I don't have anything on him.
And by the way, Mueller never got the vilification that he so richly deserved when he died.
Villain, yeah, of course. Oh no, he got praised. I saw that in the New York Times, just like they praise anyone like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so they tried to do this to Jerome Corsi, and Corsi, I think he's had some communication there with Roger Stone and all these people. And Corsi said, "Look, I'm in my 80s. I'm in poor health. I'm not going to sell out now at this stage in my life just to save my hide. I'm right with my God. I'm ready to go. If I need to go to prison, fine. I don't have that much time left in the world. So you do what you have to do, but I'm not playing ball. And they ended up walking away. But it just shows what was going on during those years. I mean, this is what happens. I'm on TikTok. Yeah, we're still on TikTok. This is what happens.
Congratulations.
This is, in fact, I think before I go on, I'm going to shut down TikTok. TikTok, thank you for joining me, everyone. I'm signing off.
That was over 40 minutes on TikTok.
Yeah, that's enough.
Probably a record.
I think it is, but I'm not continuing with them, because what I'm about to say is that this is what happens when you have a coup d'etat and you have a rotten, corrupt regime. They're going to put people in prison and destroy people who are going to try to expose that. And they like to talk about fascists. That was the closest thing this country has ever seen to a complete fascist takeover.
Well, do you know that this guy, I think his name was Hauk, who they brought in the stormtroopers to arrest some Catholic guy that was involved in a protest. They brought the stormtroopers in the middle of the night, arrested the guy.
In front of his 8 children, dragged him out onto the street with guns drawn, kicked the door down.
So the thing finally comes to trial. He gets acquitted in 1 hour.
Yeah.
So you got to ask yourself, how can you be Merrick Garland?
Oh,
all right. No. I mean, I'm seriously asking this. Okay, look, I get it. Biden wanted to have some targets, so go ahead and try to find some people that aren't like these Simon Pure individuals, But to do this overkill arrest, I mean, what a total scumbag Merrick Garland must be.
Well, don't forget, first of all, that really backfired. And by the way, recently he got a settlement that I think is in the
$1 million.
Yeah. But Garland started out as the fixer for the Oklahoma City bombing. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
Now, that was the beginning of his public career. So he's like another Mueller. I mean, these people are establishment fixes. Elizabeth Warren is another example. We could go into her history another time. The point is that these, they're just, they're goose stepping along. I mean, they're just apparatchiks for this international order. They get there.
But how does this happen, Chuck? You go to law school and you graduate and decide, I want to be a political hack, corrupt a-hole. That's what I want my career to be. Are there people that actually do that? I guess there are.
Look, my theory, and this is, I know it sounds a little all-encompassing, and it's not true in every case, but I would be willing to bet it's true in most, is that these are people who are pledged to a secret society that is involved with all of this. Skull and Bones, maybe. We've talked about this. I mean, we could go too deep. Some of these college, elite college societies, Harvard has one. All the Ivy Leagues. All these people were part of that, right? Mueller was part of that. I mean, probably Garland. And they do oaths to these of loyalty to these societies over all else, including their own families. They will have a horrible death if they violate any of these oaths. Now, most people who are, for example, in Masonic lodges, they may think in a certain way that is corrupting. They may have influenced religion in a way that is corrupting, but they're not necessarily high-level, evil, high-degree people. They were still on what they call the outer portico.
Yeah.
But the people who are on the inner portico, the inner chamber, it is a very strange thing, and it's a fascinating subject to right now. I think it's had a huge foothold in this country. Washington warned about it, even though he was a member of a Masonic lodge. he received a letter from someone in Massachusetts, this Dr. Snyder, I don't know who he was, who said, and this is when Washington had retired. He goes, "Do you realize that the Illuminati has infiltrated the lodges in this country?" And Washington sent back a response that I think it's in Mount Vernon, where he said, "I am very aware of the Illuminati and its diabolical influence. I don't believe it's influenced my lodge." But, it's whether he did or not, he knew about it. And he was fully aware of he would completely rejected it. And in the 1820s, John Quincy Adams, who was a great man, he and others formed the Anti-Masonic Party. It was the first third party in the United States. It was the first political party that had primaries, that had they patented a lot of. They had conventions. They kind of patented a lot of what we now do in politics, and they had some successes. Eventually, they were absorbed by the Whigs, and they were eventually absorbed by the Republicans. But he was responding to a scandal at that time regarding a Masonic lodge, which basically executed a man who had written a book exposing Masonry in upstate New York by the name of Henry Morgan, and that he published their oaths, which are horrible, and exposed their whole rotten scheme. So I only bring it up to make the point that these groups have a major foothold in American life, and that they are not. The late Dr. Anthony Sutton from the Hoover Institute in Stanford, wrote a book about Skull and Bones. It's excellent. I actually interviewed him. The America's Establishment, and he shows how much their tentacles are everywhere. How they came from Germany in the 1850s. I think it's actually reasonable to assume that they are a direct offshoot of the Illuminati. That's an opinion. I can't prove it. Nobody knows. But certainly their agenda, their beliefs, their particulars reflect that. And they're at Yale. So anyway, that's what I think happens to these people who graduate college, like Merrick Garland. They get wrapped up in it. That's their loyalty.
And they become true believers.
Yeah. And they're connected to the same rotten people all over the world. Albert Pike is an example, and he was a Confederate general, one of the most brutal, by the way, who wrote a book, Dogma, Morals and Dogma, I think it was, where he was the highest level Mason in this country after the Civil War. And he predicted World War I and II. He eventually said that there'll be a World War III involving Islamic forces. This is in the 1850s.
Yeah.
So I just it's a great.
I guess I'm glad you switched off TikTok.
Oh no, that's not for TikTok. I had to shut once we got into the Biden coup. That I know that that's still verboten at TikTok. So I don't want to blow that whole station up. I get what's censored and what's not. So anyway, we're sort of reaching the end of the program, and what do you predict and what do you see going on with the Iran war at this point?
Well, unfortunately, it's the same, and there's a word for this which escapes me, that the Islamists use when they're just, they're lying. Oh, yes, we have a ceasefire. Yes, and so they'll violate the ceasefire and come back to the table and violate the ceasefire. And I think what's going to happen, they're trying to provoke Trump, I believe, into some heavy action because they know there are traitors within his own government that'll condemn him for it. Because apparently we're supposed to be at status quo, trying to be on both sides of the fence forever, right? And somebody that wants to take a definitive action, that just doesn't play real well in Washington, I guess.
Right.
I think what's going to happen is they're going to find that they can't really play this game. There's going to be some strategic hits, and and I believe they're going to try to find more of these mullahs and just kill them
I think
until it gets to the point that the people could come in and take back their own country.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's happened is that, and my source on this is Steve Turley. He's a pretty good researcher. That we have wiped out the entire infrastructure of their government, wiped out most of their army, their navy, their missile launchers, maybe about half of them. They have fired missiles into all of their neighbors, and they've pissed off everyone in the region. The Saudis, the UAE, Qatar, even their allies, everybody's taken missiles from Iran at this point, not just Israel. I mean, Jordan, Turkey took a few, Azerbaijan. And I think that China made some rumblings about helping them, but they're not so far. I think what happened is that it's controlled by these autonomous factions, like these 37 provincial governments. It's like the third line of survival. And that one side really doesn't know what the other side's doing. So when one side says we're going to open the Strait of Hormuz, there's another group that doesn't get the message. So they start firing missiles, and there's no central control. Things are starting to fall apart. And now they've had a falling out with the Pakistanis, apparently. I think that they're going to fall apart. I mean, it may not happen immediately. It's not going to be this great.
Well, that's exactly the reason it's taking so long, because you have this completely diffuse arrangement, which is also, as you say, why these contradictory things are occurring. Right. Yeah, we'll open the straits. No, we'll close the straits. We'll fire on them. I think they're just going to have to neutralize more of these disparate points, and it's a pain, but somebody's going to have to do it. And again, at what point are the people of Iran going to finally rise up?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, maybe we waited too long, because in January they did rise up, and something like 35,000 of them were killed. So I get the fact that it's difficult. Even Obama has admitted now that when there was a big uprising in Iran and he didn't do jack squat about it, it didn't help, that was a mistake. I don't know who his advisors were. I have a feeling it might have been Rahm Emanuel. Talk about a sellout. He's like, we want to cut off all military aid to Israel. And he's running for president. I think he's kissing up to the AOC branch of the party, and it's not going to work. But for whatever reason, they didn't help Iran then. And the people of Iran are scared. I mean, I get it. They're helping quietly, but it's going to take, Trump has to stay the course. And the Saudis and the Gulf states, they want Trump to stay the course. They don't want him to back out. They need to see resolve, and they need to see trust that he's going to see the thing out. And if he does, then it's going to work. It all comes down to one person, and that's Trump. It really does.
Well, and I think this has to be emphasized more, that unlike the end of Mussolini, where he was trying to escape in a German uniform,
right?
But surprisingly, quote unquote, was recognized. Like the most famous face in Italy.
Right. Exactly.
So they take him, shoot him there. The partisans come and hang him in a gas station, whatever.
Yeah.
You're not going to quite have that, I'm afraid, in Iran, because you don't have this sort of central place of government. But on the other hand, they can't keep that up forever either. It's just not going to work.
That's right. And maybe they'll find some fig leaf to, sort of like keeping the Japanese emperor after Hiroshima. Fine, leave him there. He came out. MacArthur played the thing brilliantly. He brought him out to the people. He made people shake his hand and see he's not some god, that he's just a regular guy. And that they were able to take over the government that way, by leaving in sort of the symbolism. Maybe that could be, it could be a Japanese type thing. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, of course, the big mistake that happened years after was when Hirohito went to Disneyland. which was not well received, by the way.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he's getting any popularity prizes. I mean, but the point is that Japan became a productive and good ally in a modern country, and same thing with Germany. And so it can happen, but it has to be done using the unique conditions of that country. But ultimately, that radical vision has to be destroyed. It's just otherwise it's just going to continue to wreak havoc in the entire world. So, what's coming up on the Substack?
Well, we have that piece on the media can't help itself, which actually I got some hate mail on.
Really?
So,
want to read it?
And it was actually from someone that knows me personally.
Okay.
Yes, I too have people close to me that are left wing and do not appreciate some of my points of view. But they don't really know how to express themselves too well either. So it was kind of fun. But
all right,
it was just the movie itself. The Girl Can't Help It was basically just a way to get a bunch of rock and roll stars to mid-1950s to be in a movie.
Sure.
Jane Mansfield, I guess, had two big parts.
Oh yeah, good.
And but yeah, we were gonna, I'm working on a couple of other things, but you get to the point. I think as an author, you would appreciate this, that you really have to watch yourself, where you keep writing the same thing every time.
Well, you bring something. You bring something to it, and
yeah. I mean, you'll understand if, like, People Magazine seems to have a template for these articles. I've joked with my wife. They did a thing on Valerie Bertinelli.
Right.
That Eddie Van Halen was the love of her life, and she was taking all this crap because she was fat. And then when she learned to love herself, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, the usual.
So then they take the exact same template and they use that for Jenny Garth, who was in Beverly Hills 90210. The same thing, it was terrible. People hated me, and then I had to learn to live, and I guess there are people that like seeing the same thing again and again. Every Hallmark movie
it's the same.
is the same.
I mean, every self-help book is like that.
Yeah.
You got to have better self-esteem. You got to do this. All this kind of like babble. It's just it's so.
Well, I joke with my wife, and I gave this to my grandson some time ago. There's basically only 12 plots that exist in all literature. And no, I can't name them all. But I said this to him. So it's like, but people like the same formula play out. And that's been this reason for success of so many TV series.
Sure, that's why they call them sitcoms.
Yeah,
and it's like it's a kind of a formulaic thing. Everything gets all wrapped up nicely at the end. People there's a little conflict, and then it all gets resolved. And it's all neat. All right. So anyhow, we'll talk to you next week, and let's hope everything.
All right, sounds good. And you set a record with TikTok, so
keep track. Really. I think I was there for almost 45 minutes. All right. Take care.
All right. Next time.